time.
Yeah.
What do we spend? I mean, the only thing we can control is time. The time we have
We can control or not control.
can control. The sun.
How can we control
The
time?
sun rises.
Like, I want it to be a bit light. Oh, look at the moon.
Yeah, yeah. Look.
Going back to the mythology we spoke of earlier, in all of these mythologies, death manifested itself as drought. This crisis right now is, in a way, a version of that drought, I think, which I believe ultimately is due to a form of unbalance. And the male-female aspect is one of them, but there are also other aspects that are part of this. And it makes me think of the shadow of Carl Jung. Carl Jung speaks about the shadow and about integrating the shadow, the integration of the shadow, basically. We all have a shadow, and if you suppress it, it's going to manifest in some form of extreme, right? Now, if we take this from an individual level and lift it to a societal level and look at Sweden or Europe, but let's just say Sweden today, right? Political correctness is one of them, one of those forms of suppression, I think. The sense of goodness, right, that people derive out of being like extremely generous, right? Like, we have to be open to everything. We cannot have any bad feelings or any bad thoughts about anyone. Open borders, etc., etc. To me, one has to distinguish between niceness and genuine kindness, right? And a lot of this strike me as niceness and a very egocentric thing at bottom that actually derives out of me feeling good about myself rather than actually me being genuinely kind. And what happens here is this is a form of suppression of the shadow. And that is in itself is what leads to the shadow manifesting as extremism in terms of far right extremism and so on and so forth. So this is one form of imbalance that I feel exists today, our suppression of the shadow on a societal level. It happens on an individual level as well.
No, I think some of what you're saying is related to this, would you say, political correctness? I think it's a conflict we have in the Western world, very much in Sweden. We're the most individualistic country in the world. So it's the belief that it's the individual that is the most important part of society, right?
Yeah.
We all know that humanity, the worst punishment you can give to someone is not killing them.
Isolating them?
It's isolating them from the group. So we're pretending that we are strong individuals who manage our own lives and ourselves and are not dependent on the collective. But so it's so deeply rooted in us that the collective is actually more important than ourselves. And in denying that, we have formed some other sort of strange collective, which is we sort of move in flocks without even knowing we're in a flock, which I think is the political correctness. Like, you have to say the right words. I'm so individual, I decide on my own and I'm totally free, but I will be very keen on how do you look when you say things, what words. So we created a language, not body language, a language, a media language, which
with restrictions
that corrects us very harshly. And we still think of we're free individuals, but we have a very corrective system in Sweden that sort of makes a collective out of us all, but such a big collective that you actually don't know the others in the collective, but you have restrictions. So that would be part of the shadow. And I think since we're not acknowledging that collective group is so important, we get very frustrated as well. Because we're supposed to be happy by just being alone, right? That's ultimate happiness.
Yeah. This is interesting because, like, if you go back to Olof Palme and this whole movement of trying to create a society that is not dependent on the collective, where you as an individual, your actions, the consequences of your actions, you will have to deal with, not your family, not your clan, right?
Yeah.
And having lived in parts of the world that is much more social, I think I found a lot of people who would praise that as an idea, you know?
It was a project of freedom.
Yeah, this is ultimate freedom. I don't want to have to like take that responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And it is completely understandable. Like I can see that. However, like now, in retrospect and living in this society, we have a perspective to look upon and realize that however much it sounds good in theory, something is lost in that process of desocializing and becoming that individualistic and not recognizing the many benefits of being included in a collective and how that is innate in us as human beings, you know?
Of course. Historically, so this process has been a quite dramatic process from like last 100 years. So it's been urbanization has been its twin. So we've left villages and clans and big families and that whole system we left behind, and we created the idea of the free individual in these huge conglomerates of people, millions of people, no one belonging to the same clan. But now we're seeing a global. Now we're seeing in urban areas all over the world, the trend is very clear. We're creating very local clans. We're not related, but we're creating socioeconomic or interest-based clans or whatever in cities. So they're not going to be one city. They're going to be cities with a lot of small villages. Actually, a lot of different kinds of villages. So we're coming back.
By creating this, like, in this globalized world and in this individualistic world we live in, it's become so that as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people don't have vocations in their lives. They get a job, you know?
Yeah.
They find a job. It's not a vocation. There's no passion in it. There's no spiritual connection to it. There's no love. There's no,
yes, that's
you
right.
know? And this is why I feel like we've built a world that is dependent on materialism in such a way that even your vocation and your entire life is lost to trying to accumulate or attain this level of financial independence, if you will.
Yeah,
but in the process, you've lost your soul, and it's not actually, there's not much value in all of that energy that is put out there, you know.
I think it's. Humans have always been materialistic. We've always been. I would say we want to grow.
Yes,
grow ourselves,
it's not the
grow
same as materialistic, but
make it better. What I'm saying is that could be expressed as materialistic because the only thing that differs us from most animals is that we started using things that aren't part of us, like tools, which was the start of materialism, using material to improve our lives.
Yeah.
So I think that's very natural for us, but I think maybe it's not the materialistic that is the problem. I think it's when we lose connection to why. Because it was very natural when we have our family, when we have our big extended family, when we only have people we love around us, then it's very motivating. But when we put that all away, when you're sitting there yourself, but you still have all these tools that the only reason you have it is to protect those who you love and your children to be. Then what's the use of the tools? And I think that's where we are in many places right now.
Okay.
We have all these tools and all this material knowledge. That the only reason is to protect what we love, people we love, but we don't have the people we love there anymore. So it may be, I think it's maybe looking at it from the wrong way to just point at materialism as being bad for us. It's materialism without deep core connection to the meaning of everything.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I would say materialism at the expense of our passions and well-being.
And yes, and you said it a few minutes ago. Time. Yeah. What do we spend? I mean, the only thing we can control is time. The time we have.
We can control or not control?
Can control. The sun,
how can we control
the
time?
The sun rises.
Like, I want it to be a bit light. Oh, look at the moon.
Yeah, look. You know, when it looks like that, it's windy in the moon. I think it's actually a British author who wrote that his first time. Look, it's stormy at the moon. Anything can happen when there's a storm at the moon.
Okay.
Now, what I was, where were we?
You said that you can control time. The only thing we can control is time. How so? I don't get. That's like the one thing I can't control. In my mind, you know.
But if we imagine that we have 24 hours per day, we can't do much about that, right? But we can totally control how we use that time.
How we use it, okay.
That is the only thing we can control. The rest of the world, most things are so chaotic and so interdependent. So basically we can control very little what happens, but we can control what we spend our time with. And with this...
You can't say that to a youth who has to go to school. No. Like, you have to spend half of your life going to school.
Yes.
It's not their choice.
No, you're right. But you can control what you when you are in school, you decide what energy to put into it.
Okay.
You decide but you're right there. We're prisoners now. Young people are prisoners for a long time.
Yeah.
That's something to think about.
Yeah. And I think in the process, a lot of youth tend to, or children, you know, or the school system in general, it makes us, because I think it's a natural inclination in all of us to want to seek out knowledge. It's I mean, if you look at a baby, they're constantly looking to learn something. It's so embedded within us, in our nature, and we slowly kill it, ironically, through the process of learning, like that we call school.
If we ask our kids, in many parts of the Western world, you would ask the kids, what do you think about school? I hate it.
Yeah.
If you chose how you would spend your time, what would you do?
Yeah.
Not go to school. And then we go to poor countries. We ask the kids, what do you think about going to school? It's fantastic. It's so great. I get to learn all these things. I think it's connected to if you can see how you're going to use the knowledge you get, then it's meaningful.
But it's also, I mean, it depends on what countries you're talking about, but I think also it's very much the structure of how, I mean, the way that knowledge is being, and what kind of knowledge, you know, is being taught. We're about to have za'atar. You know what that is. You've already had that, which is thyme from Lebanon, and kishik. Do you know kishik?
Probably, but I don't know the name.
You probably had the kishik manouche. And what's interesting about this, I'm using Swedish rye bread and very Lebanese. Like, this is za'atar from Lebanon. So this is integration. And I honestly don't think that this combination has ever been done before, especially on open fire like this. So we're having something very unique right now.
I believe in organized controlling of people by lying and manipulating.
Like for me, it's all about coherence. If someone tells me that the earth is flat, I'm like, don't waste my time with this shit, seriously. But to say that there is no such thing as conspiracies, that to me is also not very intelligent.
When the conspiracy theory gets so complex, it gets ridiculous. Bad things, I think people who conspire do it in the same way that we try to convince each other to things. We do it because we want to do good.
Just looking at history, there has been such things as proven to have been, conspiracy, form of psyops, psychological operations on people, mind-altering techniques. Versus Aldous Huxley's.
What's one of the where the humans species, what we're best at is
Eating.
Gossiping.
Okay.
How in the world would you keep it secret?
Anything. You cannot do anything to the world outside that you do not do to yourself.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But eventually, there will be balance. But those of us who see the balance, who have the calmness or integrity to see it, will live the same sort of in the same world as those who are frustrated and panicking.
But our experience is different.
Yes, and we will be better off.
Yeah.